Shall we begin? Let's begin now.
Vinny, thanks a million for agreeing to this. I know we've been trading favours over and back, so I'm calling one in here by getting you to do this little chat with me. Kind of like we said off the camera, there's a few things that obviously I want to talk to you about, but for the golfers that may not know as much about rugby as some of the people do, like give us a bit of a background into what like your current role is and some of the history you've been a part of up until now.
So my current role is head of analytics and innovation with the IRFU. So I guess it crosses over a couple of different areas, but mainly it's maximizing, always trying to maximize performance, whatever that might look like. So anything that we do has to have an effect on our performance on the pitch or on the development of a player. So right the way through the analytics and to the innovation, that would hold firm. I think, yeah, look, I've been involved in some really nice wins and some real low lows, but I'm sure you can relate, like in any sport, you're going to probably lose more than you win, and unless you're very lucky. And I think that's something you probably appreciate, especially in Irish sport. We appreciate the highs a lot more because potentially they're fewer and far between, and when you get them, they're great. And then the low points are obviously the same as anyone else in sport, that you just suck it up.
It's weird though how, I suppose, one of the things that's different between the sport that I work in and yours is like every match you guys play, there's a very clear winner and loser, whereas like in golf it's a little bit more graded, where some weeks some guys might consider a top 10 a decent result, other weeks like anything less than a win isn't a good result. So you know what I mean? So I think yes, we like there's winners and losers on a week-to-week basis. It's a little bit more nuanced, where it's kind of like you could have a top 5 and consider it a decent week, and you could have a second place some weeks and consider it a bad week. Whereas yours, I'm not, or maybe I'm getting that wrong. Maybe
I mean, lots of coaches talk about this, like, you know, that not talking about winning tournaments or winning games, and just, you know, getting their process right and not worrying about the outcome and leaving that as an aside or that as a product of the process. But at the same time, it's a sport where like coaches and players are both kind of judged on that binary 1 or 0. And it's hard. The way I play golf is very clear actually, that there's always a winner and a loser. I've never won anything. But yeah, I think you're right. I think I can't imagine in rugby sense you would come out and say, oh, I was happy enough with certain aspects of the game, but we lost. I think the challenge is always to make sure that we win the game as well as perform. So
how does that fit with, you know, like say some players might, I suppose as well, you have the collective, but then, you know, I know players like love to roll out that cliche as they're picking up a man of the match trophy that, oh, you know, like it's a team effort, I'm just happy we got the points and all. But there must be times too where like you see a team lose narrowly, but there's 4 players have had unbelievable performances within their role. How do they handle that? Do they consider that a win, or?
I'd say they never consider it a win. I think the way rugby is it has to be a selfless game, because you are reliant on the other guys around you to make sure that you look better. And I think something you hear coaches talking about is to make the guy beside you look better. Whereas I guess in golf, apart from the odd team competition, you're trying to make yourself look better or you beat the course. So the challenge is there. But I think a lot of our players certainly don't. They don't take any solace in playing well and losing, whether they like it or not, or whether they think that they would. So I think the challenge now is to, especially with younger guys, developmental players, to understand that even, you know, if we were to lose a game, or if they were to lose a game, that they should be looking at their own involvement in the game as well, and not necessarily focus on the result.
We've been the last couple of guys, I suppose I've kind of come a little bit full circle over the last little while, where we would have in golf, we would have gone like quite technical. Like I think we've had kind of a few evolutions where number one video came in, so now all of a sudden, like, you know, there's some really cool footage of like Nick Faldo videoing his swing with like one of those big clunky handheld video cameras, and so we kind of got into a lot of like how swings looked and related that. Okay, if it looks good, it'll perform good. And then over the last little while, you'll have seen where there's a lot of guys with some like unorthodox actions out there. But
mine is you've obviously seen.
Yes, like yours. The only difference between you and like a Matthew Wolf would be the performance piece. So they're unorthodox actions.
Otherwise, the exact same.
Otherwise, exact same.
Yeah.
Performs really well, and it's not so much a prop because it's more about like we've got some more 3D info and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it's almost as if we've gone quite down in golf. Sometimes we go down a little bit too far down the technical route, and we ignore the whole performance and competitiveness piece. And if you look back at like the best players over the years, and like our job ultimately is to help players maximize their performances or whatever the definition of that is.
Yeah.
It can be easy sometimes to like almost like coach the competitiveness out of them at times, if that makes sense. Like say for example, when you're talking that development piece and you're going to players like, oh, don't worry about winning or losing. It's like the process and all. Like it's sometimes in some players, it's like obviously you have to manage it, but it's that like the fire within them.
Yeah, you don't want to lose that for sure.
Yeah.
But again, I think the best coaches, and it probably applies to golf as well, is that they know what each player needs, and there's some players that do need to be, they need a kind of a reassurance to say, look, okay, we lost, but your contribution today was very good. And then there's other players that might need to kick up the ass constantly. That keeps them on the edge. I think I know players that would always say that they prefer when they're right on the edge of kind of nearly being in trouble, where they're constantly worried, but that they need that, but not everybody needs that. And I think that the best coaches that I've seen know which players need what and when.
It's easier. I think it's certainly from my end. I think it's a little bit easier for us where, for the most part, you're working with individuals at a time. Where it must be quite tough when you have individuals within a collective.
Yeah, and that's where I think even like you look at like people talk about personality profile and personality testing and all of this to get an idea of what type of characters you have in the group, and that's good to an extent. I think that gives you a starting point, but again, like say my personality on a Saturday might not be my personality on a Wednesday, like maybe on Wednesdays I'm in work mode, or on Saturdays you adopt a different personality, and you can change reactions to to adversity. Some players thrive when it gets really, really tight, others don't like it and have to be coached how to love it. And I think that's one of the things that I see teams going down that rabbit hole of personality profile of this person is this and this, which gives them no room to shift within their environment. And that scares me too, that let's not say he's a hothead. If he's only a hothead when for I don't know, when he's going down the last and he's like, he's 6 shots back or something, that's, there has to be somewhere in between where I think coaches do understand that sway. There's I don't know.
I think I've definitely seen that with players where a lot of it is the story I tell myself today is like, so for example, let's say I've seen other players where they might have played a tournament and over the last 9 holes they got themselves fired up when they played well, so now they tell themselves I have to be fired up to play well.
Yeah.
And then they might do it the next tournament and all of a sudden they play worse because they get themselves so amped up that they lose focus, they add tension into their game and they play badly, and now all of a sudden it's actually I need to be really calm to play well, and it's like they're constantly like this here. And I think the best players have seen it's like you said, it's like the inverted U, they're somewhere up around the top and the best person can kind of push themselves back. It's like
exactly.
So and I think with personality tests and stuff like that, you're right. I think like what the answers to the test will depend on what narrative the player is telling themselves on that particular day.
On that day, yeah. And that's massive for me again. and also does that personality hold true when they go into a group environment, which is where we're at. So like you might be a certain type of person dealing with yourself, managing yourself, but then when you go in, you work with a squad of 35, your third choice scrum half, or your third choice prop. Does your personality change? I think it does, because like you have to adopt a different role. You might come from your province as a starter, starting scrum half, or you're starting tight head, and then you go into an Ireland camp where you become the third choice. You're probably not going to start this weekend. You need to have a very strong personality not to allow yourself to drift into something different. And I think a lot of players, actually read a lot of players' autobiographies, they do talk about, and you can see it through the kind of text, is that they're not one person. They're a number of different people at different times in their career, and potentially in even a smaller gap as a World Cup cycle or the Six Nations.
Yeah, and I think the thing that's interesting from my end is, like, when you look at players, and let's say for example they have their own fluid as it is, ways of operating in different modes, but then you have to have some kind of a collective ethos and stuff like that. And some of the collective ethos might not sit 100% naturally with some of the players. And then the other thing as well, and I think I would have made that mistake before too, like going to like different championships, like European teams and stuff like that, where you're trying to have like one, like say, like value set, like feeding into it, where that might really change. Like on one day it might be, you're going up against a team that you on paper should beat, and you have to get them not to be complacent and to be focused.
Exactly.
And then the next day you might be going up against a team where on paper you really should have no chance, and you have to actually get them to be a little bit more develop belief and a bit more pumped up. You know what I mean?
Golf lends itself to that. Like golf lends itself to it's the ultimate in a sport where somebody can just go on a run and out of nowhere play the best golf of their life. And in rugby it's a little bit more stable. The underdog doesn't have much of a chance compared to golf. But then when I look at like the odd time, like you play golf, like I'd play, and like I'd be playing with somebody, they're 150 yards out, they hit a shot and it goes to like 3 feet of a pin, and I'm there thinking to myself, golf's the only sport that allows for that one moment for somebody to have a shot that's probably better than if they put a pro beside them.
100%.
But it doesn't hold true for the other 150 shots in their round. But
yeah, watch your side.
But that's in rugby, that probably doesn't exist. So that you couldn't just put in. You don't get that lucky moment where you feel like you're as close to that as you could be. But anyway, sorry, back to the start. Yeah. You were saying binding an ethos to the team.
Yeah,
I think that is really interesting, because again, talking about personality and people, like if your ethos is to go in and just fuck somebody up, like if that's the ethos of the team, it's aggressive, it's a gnarly kind of an attitude. If you've got a guy on your team or a girl on the team that doesn't actually, that's not their personality type, or their, the way they are is to be, calm, measured, that is difficult to tie them in and say, no, this is us. And how they get, I think what you've got to do is get them close to us, but always understand that not necessarily you're 15 or you're 25 or 23 are all going to be within that circle. Some may sit slightly on the edges.
Right. And when you go back to, say, for example, the way you described, like your role within the IRFU, and you said ultimately your job is always looking to find ways in which you can maximize performance. Like, what's your definition of that, and then how does like the analytics and the innovation piece fit within that like framework that you put it under?
I think that guides me in everything that we do. Like, we have a really good team of analysts at the moment. We've got some incredible guys working with us, and everything that I would say to them is based around is this going to make us better, or is this going to make the player better? And I think we have done, we've all gone down the route of collecting too much data, or, bashing our heads off numbers that don't matter. And I think that guiding principle of us now is that if it doesn't, if it makes the boat go faster, if it doesn't do that, then we've become a lot more lean in our processes, I think, and anything that we're putting together has an immediate or potential impact in what we deliver to a player or a coach.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where you're always trying to push the boundary. And I think the innovation side of it, like, for me, it's just trying to do things a little bit better, and potentially a little bit differently. And, guys can come into national team camps for, some guys could have a national career of maybe 10 years. Like, how do you excite a guy walking into the team room for the 10th year in a row, coming into the same Six Nations, coming into the same hotel, coming into the same stadium, and how you bring those guys into something new. And then at the same time, you've got a 19 or 20-year-old kid coming in for his first camp, and everything is amazing.
Yeah.
So, like, I remember Josh van der Fleer when he came in, and he was like, "What time does the swimming pool close at?" I was like, "I think you can go in whenever you want." Oh, amazing. so those kind of things you forget that they're all at different stages of their career, and it's the same in any sport. But managing that and trying to innovate within that framework of knowing where they all are, and who likes doing things differently and who doesn't.
One of the things I suppose, like, we all fall into the trap of, and I think we were chatting briefly about this today, is like looking at it's all well and good to say, like, is this going to make us better? But sometimes you don't know, and it's going to take.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's like, is this going to make us better? I don't know. Like, it could make us worse, but we have to.
That's it, and I love that. I love, like, especially in technology side of things where we've tried to push the boundaries and doing different things. I have a chest of drawers in the office of stuff that didn't work. Like, I have just so much stuff that didn't work and projects that just were a disaster, and I'm really proud of that drawer because each of those signifies something that we pushed and then failed, and you don't get afraid to admit it, that you go, Jesus, that was a disaster, because it was. But I think you get more prudent in how far the failure goes. You're not failing spectacularly, but I always use the kind of the one with, like NASA and stuff regularly have failures in the regions of billions of dollars worth of damage or cost. So, given our scenario, we make a few mistakes. People do make mistakes. Things do break. Sometimes they don't work, and that's why I love it. Like, that's why I love that failing.
One of the things in golf that I think I've seen is players and coaches alike might decide, right, well, we're going to try this thing. We're going to, like, let's say, whether it's a swing move, whether it's like learning a particular new shot, whether it's a new strategy or whatever. But I've been guilty of this, but we're not we're not clear enough on defining what success is, if you get me. So, for example, let's say we go, right, okay, well, we're going to want the club to come in a little bit stronger on the way down, or we're going to want it to, whatever the case may be, or we're going to want to move the path this way, or, we're going to change your grip, slightly this way, or we're going to change our alignment slightly another way. But we just do it, right? And then, like, how do we know whether this has been a success or not in terms of performance? Does that make sense? So, like,
yeah.
Or it might be a case of, right, we're going to work on low trajectory iron shots. Okay, fine. You work on low, but how? We just do it, and we don't necessarily define, well, like, success in this would be the ability to hit X shot X amount of times in this window. Or
yeah. When
you guys do these, like, as you say, your projects, and you go, right, is this going to make us better? What does the process look like, and how do you loop back around and go, okay, that was a success, or it wasn't a success, we're going to move on to something else?
Yeah, I think, like, the one for me is to have some kind of a framework on the judgment of success, and like, mine would always be to that kind of, I think we spoke about before, that OKRs, so objectives and key results. So if we don't have a key result that we're looking for, then we're basically just playing with a toy, or flapping about with a new idea. There has to be some kind of judgment at the end of it. How we get to that point, like, the judgment for me a lot of the time is based on stuff that is hard to quantify. It's the chat with a player in the team room, or a coffee and a cake with a coach, like, and that kind of thing, with How did you find that? Does that make things any better for you? Is that easier to do instead of a metric of 1 to 10? How good did you find, and trying to narrow everything into a specific box? What I've learned, I think, over the last couple of years is that you get far better feedback in environments that are conducive to people talking, like coffee meetings, sitting outside. As soon as you put somebody in a room with a projector and a flip chart, the whole dynamic immediately changes. And I think that's something that, you know, even from my own head now, it's something that I'm very, very conscious of. One thing Andy's changed a lot is that as a head coach, he's come in now, and so no two meetings are in the same place. Like I said to somebody recently, it's a disaster for me because we're hauling like a TV around, the 86-inch TV in and outdoors and stuff, that like onto pitches, but at the same time that creates a stimulus that's new for players. When Joe came in, Joe would have changed stuff from the previous regime, so he would have done things differently too. So there's, you know, those kind of changes are always important, and how we judge the success or failure of them a lot of the time can be just those chats, you know, like, is it working? Yeah. Okay. We don't need to put a number on it. I know golf's a little bit easier because you can start to talk about scores, and but even in golf, I worry sometimes, like I have an 8 or a 9 on a hole, but like I've played like 6 very good shots and just got very unlucky with 6 bounces. Like, so.
Yeah, and I think there's two, like, especially like there's two ways of looking at it. Like if you look at just the performance, you can kind of lose the context, but then if you just look at, like, say, qualitative, it can be a little bit like you can be subject to a lot of biases, like where, like say for example, you make a change, and there's no right answer to it, that's why we're all obsessed with what we do, but like you could go, okay, well, our objective is, you know, the thing we're doing is this, and the key result is that is if somebody feels like it's gotten better. But if you'd asked them after the front line, you would get a different answer than after the back line. Or maybe you need 2 or 3. Maybe it has to show something in a performance context, and there has to be a qualitative piece to it as well. But it's one of those things in coaching that I think, and in high performance, where we all could probably get a little bit. And the better you get at it, the more you can clean away the stuff that's not, and keep things as simple as possible, the better.
You're dead right. And that's, I think sometimes like we would do those pre-mortems, like, so that, you know, that collect that feedback before the actual performance. So instead of doing it on the Sunday after we get beaten in Twickenham, or, you know, evaluating that week on the Friday, and not base it on the biases, like you said, that will exist on the Saturday or on the Sunday night, you know. Definitely. Yeah.
Could you give us, like, you know, obviously, you know, I don't want to give any trade secrets, but can you give us a general like insight into what your pre-mortem process looks like?
Yeah, I think it's, you know what, the structure of it will change because the framework that we have is at the moment is for everybody to contribute to something that's going to make the team better and the environment better. I think a pre-mortem now is basically sitting down and saying, look, okay, what worked and what didn't, and how did we feel about it this week? How did everybody feel about their roles this week? And is there anything that we can do next week to make ourselves better? I think that we've shifted.
And this is before the performance, right?
Yeah. And it would be like within staff, I'd say. Not, you don't drag in the players the day before a game and say, what was everything like? But, you know, the coaches will feedback, the coaches will get that feeling during the week of what it was like, you know, of players. And in an environment that we have, I think, like, we live with each other for 7 or 8 weeks, it becomes another family. Like, you literally walk in and it's breakfast, dinner, lunch, training, out, match, recovery. You go to hospitals with them, you go to, you know, like, you go functions, you're on buses. You become so close that most of the feedback and stuff is brilliantly natural. It's when you've got a whole load of new team together or a whole load of new players together is where you have to put a little bit more work into it, I think.
Okay. And how would I put it? How does that relaxed, fluid nature to things, you know, fit within, like, your analytics setup. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's definitely not relaxed, right? So it's I think what it is it's an encouragement maybe to be constantly okay with being a bit vulnerable, okay with being able to say, I haven't a fucking clue what you meant earlier, or I'm way off on such and such, or, and guys don't want to say that. But I think when they see a senior player stepping up and saying, look, I wasn't good at that today, or I didn't really like what we did on a Tuesday. I think that opens up guys a little bit more. And it's not to be relaxed. It's actually to be more open to the message, or to open to send a message. And that can only be done when it's top down led, and it's everybody's comfortable being a bit uncomfortable.
Yeah. And it's, I suppose, from when you look at it after, like, let's say, for example, after a campaign or a tournament or whatever, and you have to go back and, let's say, for example, you have to analyze, well, okay, well, what happened there? What went well? What didn't go well? What we do differently? Like, how do you structure that in terms of a report? Is it more just a general get together of all the coaches and staff? What does that look like?
No, I think what we would always do is there's always a formal report. Like, we would create a formal report, but would also benchmark ourselves and our players versus the rest of the world. Because, again, it's a cliche, but like, you only have to be better than the other team to win on the day. You don't have to be better than anyone else.
Yeah.
So, and although that sounds quite simple, it's true. And there's certain things that you'll have to be to beat New Zealand that you could get away with against another team,
Right.
Where there's certain levels that you need to hit against those teams for a win. And we know what they are, but we don't necessarily achieve them. So, I mean, the formality of the report is always, where do we sit relative to that?
Okay.
The informality of the report's structure and feedback has always been, conversation, discussion. The stuff I love is just a smaller group thing, like, instead of having a 38-man feedback session, which is like, you're just going to get 3 dominant characters in, splitting it down to 4s and 5s around coffees. And in other sports as well, I think I've seen it work really, really well, where, all of a sudden the guys who are a little bit introverted have to come out, because you can't sit with 4 people and not say anything. And even less if it takes less. And then, and that's something that I think it disarms people too, the smaller number. I know in my case, I would, there's so many times in university, college, even lectures, where I'm sitting there going, I would love to ask a question here, or I would love to disagree with this guy here, but there's no chance I'm doing it in front of 50 or 100 people.
Yeah.
Whereas, in a group of 4 or 5, I would be really comfortable saying,
And what about, I suppose, the other, like, another one we're really interested in, any of us that are involved in performances, like, and you've been definitely part of some setups that have performed beyond the levels ever been achieved before. And that's what we're looking for, like, say, for example, for me with the players that I coach, is a lot of the time we're working toward performances that we haven't done yet, but yet we still have to believe are possible. So, like, when you look back at some, like, say, for example, beating the All Blacks for the first time, and, being part of the successful Lions group and all that kind of stuff, how much of it is actually consciously working on the belief that this is attainable, and then how much of it is actually the work and training and, looking at some metrics that we're like, no, it's not that we have to believe this, it's that the dad's telling us so.
I think the shift in the last couple of, like, I mean, since Joe took over the Irish job, like, can you hear me there? Yeah. One of the mad things about it is, and this might, like, there's a lot of our players that go into games genuinely with the belief they can't lose that game, and they would be shocked to lose the game, no matter who the opposition is, which is an amazing positive for Irish rugby, where you look at guys like James Ryan and Joey Carberry, young guys coming through, Gary Ringrose. There's no reason for them. They don't have that same hang up of, say, we've never beaten the All Blacks, or that doesn't exist. Joey played against the All Blacks in Chicago, and he's like, I think we had his 21st birthday on like on the Thursday before the game. So
Mad.
immediately that shows every other Irish kid and every other Irish player that, okay, there's only a certain amount of teams in the world that you're going to come up against.
Mm-hmm.
And secondly, there's absolutely no reason why any of them should beat us.
Right.
There's, you know what I mean? The gap isn't there. Like, where the gap is, okay, look, you can say we haven't got to a World Cup semi-final, but there's no team in the world that we haven't actually beaten. So if there was a couple of teams that we've never beaten, then I'd say, okay, well, the reality is that we've never beaten those teams. So if we were, if you were smart, but like in the last, say, 35 games for Ireland, we've beaten the current World Cup champions. We've beaten New Zealand. We've beaten England. We've beaten France. So for us now, it's about how do we bring that performance consistently, instead of having those peaks and troughs, which we have.
What's your take there?
It is it is that consistency. It's simple. That it's as simple as not being very simple. If that makes sense. Like, there's a whole load of things that go into consistent performance and consistent performance at a high level. And there's the physical, there's the technical, there's tactical, there's the mental, and like you can bluff your way through which is more important. But at the same time, all of them have to be right for us to win at the top level. Whereas other teams might be able to get away with one or two of those things being right on the day. I think for us, we need to make sure we fire all four at the same time. And that's what we've done in some of those big wins, and that's what we haven't done in some of the big losses.
It's funny how, like...
It's not funny.
Sorry, yeah. Well, it is funny. It isn't, but it's terribly, terribly serious. But how some teams can seem to eke out wins not at their best. Some teams need to be, as you say, firing on all cylinders. And, at what point does that become, well, they're so technically, they're so skillful or so technical that, like, they could be a little bit off and they're still good enough? Or what point is it that they just have so much belief that when things aren't going their way, they can hold steady and things eventually do fall their way?
Yeah, I think, the ultimate one for me is the Dublin football team at the moment. That is, they've had red cards, they've gone down 2 scores, they've gone down 2 goals, they literally change almost nothing. Like, they just go and they know, let's trust what we do and let's keep doing it really, really well. And I think they're the benchmark in sport for me at the moment. In even I look at rugby, football, I love all sports, golf, everything. There's very few teams that you could look at having, and somebody will go, oh, they have more people. Okay, right, yeah, I know they have more people, and I know there's a million arguments you can make as to why they're good. But what you can't argue against is the way they perform at the top level on the big day, in the big moment. That's not bought by money. That's not built by high level performers performing to a high level on the highest stage.
And the big thing you can't do is you can't argue the times they've been in adversity and seen it through. Like, whatever about dominant performances over smaller counties like Laois and Carlow and stuff like that, it's just it's a mismatch. But like, okay, they're like, let's say a Donegal or a Mayo or a Kerry or whatever, they're not as good as them. But when those teams have gotten an upper hand against them, they have, like you said, and I think you kind of nailed it. Or certainly an interesting thing for me is, like, it's the trust piece, or it's the ability to just put a collection of moments together, or a collection of like performances over time, and that consistency and eventually wears teams down.
Yeah, and that also gets into your opposition psyche too. You go 2 goals up against Dublin and you look up and you're just like, they haven't changed anything. Like, they're not remotely concerned about this. And I think when you look in sport for inspiration, they're like the great Manchester United team under Ferguson, when they were like, hated Manchester United for that reason, that like they would wait till the 93rd minute and score 2 goals or something, and you're going, they weren't even rattled, they didn't look like there was a, so those big teams, Patriots in NFL are another one, again, very, very little emotion running into. But the Dublin team is for me is the best, at that emotionless, like nearly cold-blooded process of dealing with the fuck up,
And it's like, even if you look back at, I suppose, some of the iconic golfers over the year, like say the Tiger and Seve and stuff, it's the same. And Federer too, where he's like come through those massive 5-setters. It's like Tiger's hitting it all over the golf course, and he's just somehow staying mentally in it, never, able to make the right decision, execute a pretty good shot, not compounding errors. Like he'll hit it out, he'll hit the next one pretty close, he'll make the 7-8 footer for par to keep the momentum, and he gets it round. But from an analytics point of view, like when you look at like in New Zealand, who I suppose, again, another team that maybe sometimes when they're losing, you never really feel they're out of it. And the same with the team. Yeah. Like Donegal goes like 5 points up against them at half time, or maybe even 6 points up with like 25 minutes to go. And you just know, or maybe it's that collective knowing that allows them to do it. You just know it's only a matter of time before their wheels keep turning and eventually they run you over.
And that's the thing. And what I always admire about them is that they don't seem to, like, they might change 1 or 2 positional kind of switches or maybe bring on one sub, but they don't reinvent the wheel in the middle of a game. They still go, well, if we get everything right from our end, we'll beat you. And that's quite a unique kind of way. I don't know, that the challenge is that how you simulate that in training, and like how, I don't know how you guys go about doing it in golf, but
we do, I suppose, like some of the stuff that we would do, it's like everything, you kind of have to do simulation training and contextual stuff. And the thing that we always have is the score. So it's like, okay, can you play? Look at, we're on 15. Let's pretend like it's, you got to get this thing in 200 to finish the tournament. Away you go. You're just putting a frame around it and asking them to kind of perform within the frame and see how you go. But I think that the thing that's probably, we haven't figured out a way to analyze it probably yet, but I think compounding errors is definitely something in golf that you would see, where it would be like when, let's say I hit a bad shot, or the player hits a bad shot into the trees, and then they become nervous that this shot in the trees has cost me my opportunity, and maybe they attempt a shot that they haven't got the skill set to play, and then that leads to another, which leads to a double, which puts them out of the tournament, where the best players seem to be able to either they have the skill set to get themselves out of the situation, they have the belief in that skill set, or they have the belief in the recovery that like I welcome the trees, fuck it, I'll just go, I'll get it like 100 yards out, I know I'll hit it inside 10 feet, I know I can make that putt, make par and move on. And I don't know how you guys measure that in rugby, where it's kind of like, do you notice that like maybe they play, do you ever analyze whether teams pass, whether you're like the teams you work with, maybe pass patterns change when they're down compared to when they're winning, or great changes, or
the obvious one is the kick, run, pass balance, right? So when the out half gets the ball, does he kick, run, or pass? And that can change, I think, very much based on the state of the game. So I think that we probably spent a little bit more time now in the last couple of, certainly in the last couple of months, looking at game state and the stats during those, and trying to filter out the bits that don't matter, like the parts of the game, not that the parts of the game don't matter, but looking to see how players perform in the white heat, as opposed to, and again, being able to do that with a data set of filtering it right out to the games that really matter. I think we spoke, our analysis group yesterday, we had a meeting, and we always try and bring in an external into the meeting who knows nothing about what we do. And we brought in a pilot from Aer Lingus yesterday. She flies at A330, and we got onto this conversation about, right, how do we simulate pressure? And what she had spoken about was really interesting, is that when they're doing simulation training, they literally put smoke into the cockpit, right? So in the simulator, there's smoke coming in, they put on a mask.
Wow.
And you know, that expression, put smoke in the cockpit, stuck with us yesterday. So when we kind of reviewed the how did we, or what did we take from her, it was, let's try and figure out ways to put smoke in the cockpit. Like, you know, the closer you can get to something being real, the better. And you know, in rugby, I think you've the challenge of say in the drill, passing drill, there's only about 2 or 3 things that can actually throw up in that drill that's going to change the drill. Whereas I think what what I would have taken from Lisa's talk yesterday with us was that anything can go wrong, and anything does go wrong in rugby. Like, you know, you could have a red card after 2 minutes, right? You could have another red, like CJ Standers won in South Africa. You know, the biggest game he's playing back in South Africa, and he's gone, right? And it's like one of the cleanest players you'd ever see. Just his arse landed into Patrick Lambie's face, and it's a red card. And you know, by the letter of the law, it's red. So there's nothing. We're not going to argue that. But then, do we really ever get to the point where we simulate in training? And we do. We train with one man down, or we train with one player down. But you know, how can we, as everybody, as backroom staff, as coaches, make training have a consequence? You know, a real consequence, like the smoke in the cockpit.
Big time, yeah. And that's something, like, I don't know whether you guys have it in rugby, but like sometimes as a set of coaches, you're so eager for confidence is overplayed a little bit, if that makes sense. You want the training to go well so the players feel good about the training, as opposed to are they actually getting better? And it's kind of like, you know, that's, you know, what I'd imagine in pilot school, they're not going to, you know, a coach isn't going to jump in and guide a player through what to do with the smoke in the cup. They want them to, in simulation, to crash, because they want them to realize maybe the seriousness of not figuring this shit out in this context.
Yeah.
And in golf, I know definitely, and it's something I've learned from like chatting to Dave Allred, and then like Ed Coughlin and stuff who works in some different sports, is like you have to be okay with players failing in training and failing often, as not, you know, because otherwise if they don't taste that inability to get it done in training, how are you going to deconstruct it?
Yeah, and it's easy to coach. I think it's always easy to coach drills that are easy to do. You know, like if you coach a drill and say it's 4v1, you're going to have a score pretty much every time. You go, brilliant, well done. The passing will probably be really high quality, but making drills maybe that are hard, you know, that are awkward and that are messy, and being comfortable being a bit messy in a drill, like, I don't know, sticking a tree in front of it and say, right, you've 2 shots to get onto the green, you're behind this tree. Like I often think, like on a range where, especially driving range, like you have a nice mat and then you've got a tee box. Like, I mean, most of my shots when I play golf are in like eaves that are like up, like I'd be like up to there in bushes and marshes, and like I see parts of the golf course other people don't see, but I never practiced digging a ball out of rough that's that high, and because it's messy, it's shit practice, it's not enjoyable.
Yeah, and it's hot, you know. And I think as well, one of the things that we've fallen into the trap of is trying to find the right way instead of trying to find a way.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's
Absolutely.
I want to be right. Is this okay? Is this right? As opposed to, is this functionable? Is this going to get the job done?
Yeah.
And even I was speaking to one of our sports biomechanics experts about this, and it's like we work so much in range of motion, but we don't really work a lot on like awareness of motion. So it's like, okay, I want you to have a perfect alignment here, as opposed to, okay, let's see, can you still start out online from here, like holding it this way. It's almost as if we're scared to fall. We're scared if we fall out of our patterns that chaos will ensue. And like you said, like chaos is going to ensue anyway, so you may as well be better prepared for it.
If you think of the chaos involved in rugby, you've got 30 players, you've got the only constant really is the referee in that they police an offside line. Other than that, it actually is one of the most chaotic sports in the world. And I think I read somewhere about like the thought of like perfection is the enemy of, you know, of being good, like, or being great, you know, like that. We like you say, you're trying to design a drill to be the perfect drill, but actually we can get away with being a pretty good drill instead of trying to fucking spend 2 years trying to develop a drill that's, I don't know.
The
Are you
way I
allowed
would,
curse? Are you allowed curse on your?
yeah, of course, yeah.
Does YouTube block that out?
I don't think so. I always click this
Sorry.
video is not for kids anyway when I am doing this. So
Okay.
I think you're like Chris what you want. The one that I wanted to ask you kind of about was when you guys are like analyzing and looking at your, like, there's obviously these patterns of play that you guys work on, which I would imagine is as close as we can get to patterns of movement that we would work on in golf. So for example, you might have, when you have control of possession, the movements that the players make at different times.
Yeah.
In your guys' in a training context, how much time is spent working on the patterns of movement versus on actual gameplay? If that makes sense.
I think one of the biggest difference is that in a club environment where you've got the player 7 days a week or 6 days a week, for say whatever the whole season from August onwards. In an international setup, you've got them on a Monday. We generally do walkthroughs on Mondays, train on the pitch on Tuesday, down day on Wednesday, Thursday train, Friday captain's run, play, and Saturday. The window for developing movement pattern and that kind of thing is so small. I think when you get to international level, it's the coaching is nearly trying to get all the bits and gel them together as quick as we can in the space that we have, and being able to work on the technical side of skills. I guess that's why we have a coaching staff of 5 that are on-field coaches, because they can pick up those little bits as we go. But then in a province, I presume in the time exists where they can work on their, you know, their jackal technique or their line out throw, or, you know, and really refine the skill of it. But definitely in international environment, you're trying to tip away at it, but you don't make as much of a dent as you can, because, or as you could in a province, simply because of the time.
So in international setup, you're more looking at how are we going to handle all these different scenarios that may come at us from the opposition that we're about to face, or from the strategy that we're trying to try and impose in this game.
Yeah, exactly. I think that you would spend far more time in your week on the prep for a game as opposed to the prep for just the prep. You know, that if you're in Leinster, you're constantly working on the Leinster way, and the international way might be slightly different, because it's going to be, again, it's just time restriction. You know, you could, even in the World Cup, we could train as little as, say, 70 minutes or 80 minutes in a week or prior to a game, if you've got a short turnaround. And in that 70 or 80 minutes, you're literally trying to get a combination of maybe 2 halfbacks that haven't played together before, you know, a 6-day turnaround from when we played Scotland to Japan, and then a really short turnaround to play a Wednesday game. If you're training on the Sunday or the Monday, you're not doing a skill development session. You know, you're doing, get everybody in the right place and trust that the skills that they've developed over the past 25 years are going to be.
That's so. On World Cup week, you guys might only have 70 to 80 minutes training time between matches.
Yeah. Worst case scenario, yeah, because not every game, but like as the tournament goes on and as you pick up injuries in the tournament, you've only a squad of 31. Training becomes unbelievably short, sharp, and intense. And on-field training, again, if you played on a Saturday, perfect example would be the 6-day turnaround from Scotland to Japan. You would only get 2 sessions in, and then the turnaround from Japan to playing Russia was 4 days. So in that, again, that's 2 sessions, maybe with a captain's run included. So it's managing that, and I think that's the challenge when you go to major tournaments, that the players are used to a certain stability in their week, whereas you go to World Cup, that goes out the window. A Lions tour is the exact same. You play Wednesday, Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday for 6 weeks. Guys aren't used to that, and I think that's where in the last tour anyway, where Warren Gatland got stuff really. He did stuff really well in that there was two teams, so like on the Wednesday, the team that were playing, they were prepping for a game, but the other team that weren't playing were training on the Wednesday morning. It was a pain in the ass for us again, because you have to drag all the equipment out for training and then drag another set of equipment out for a match that night. But what it did was it meant that we weren't missing a session during the week. But World Cup is really tough.
So he had one team that were like going out to compete, and would this be like in the test matches? Is like,
yeah. So like it was on rotation, so they didn't have a set midweek team and a test team, but basically a test team would be picked, a midweek team would be picked for whatever week it was, and then they would have one or two of those sessions would be without the other group, because they're going to be on a different recovery protocol or a different strength protocol, different training session. Unbelievable management to try and keep all of that rolling. Like there's lads going off to gym sessions with the conditioners at 7 a.m, then they're doing a session in the afternoon, and then they might have to be on the bench in the night time if somebody got sick during the day. I don't know. It was really it's actually a logistical success, the Lions tour, that it works.
It's one of the things. It's one of the things I've always been like, well, how do those guys that are only doing 70, 80 minutes worth of work in between matches? Because golf is one of those things where you can, and definitely happens. I think Harrington said it recently. Early in his career, he was preparing too much for Thursday and not enough for Sunday afternoon. So he's working way too hard Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And I think that's definitely something that other sports can teach golf, is like, what do the players be outside those 90 minutes, let's say, or 100 minutes over 5 days? What are they doing to get themselves ready?
That's like, I think what the best players are doing is they're taking ownership of their own preparation. That's the best way I can describe it. They own their week themselves. They don't, so they come down on a Sunday to Carton House, and the guys who are there a little bit longer, they have a checklist nearly of what they need to do and when during that week. So on Sunday, they might do their opposition scout of, say, knowing the backfield setup of Wales, who's a left footer, who's a right footer, who might play, who mightn't play, what they do off first phase. Others might come in and get all their own stuff sorted on a Sunday. And then on a Monday, mini group meetings, like catch up with say if you're a centre, you might meet with the centres group. There might be a backs meeting and then a walkthrough. Recovery is massive. I know that sounds like such a flaff, like when you say, we have to do loads of recovery. But to peak for an international on a Saturday, you do need to have a very, very clear recovery strategy. And then during the week, it's like a Wednesday's a down day, which is they're encouraged to switch off mentally, so that they come in again, like you said, buzzing for the Saturday. It's not like that they're drained by the time they get on the pitch on a Saturday. So it's the days are full. The days are really full. They go home on a Tuesday night and they're back in on a Wednesday night. So you go home, and a lot of guys have kids and go home, spend some time with kids. They always come back in a better mood on a Wednesday night because they've had that kind of lift from family, and then they can get a proper night's sleep on a while. Like Rory Best was hilarious because he'd be like coming into camp, he'd be like, I can't wait for a good night's sleep. And I think the guys with kids are like, they do find that where all of a sudden, like, it's okay to disappear at like 1 p.m. for a 3-hour nap. You can't do. You've got two sprogs running around. But yeah, I think they do own their own preparation, and I think that's the product of a good environment. Hopefully, is that they should know what they need, and that's, it's a challenge for me though, because I'm thinking we generically throw stuff at them, and these are your files, these are things you need to know this week. And now my shift in the last couple of months has been right to really individualize it and not give somebody something that they're not going to need or want. So Jordan Larmour doesn't get the same stuff as Johnny Sexton. Johnny Sexton might not get the same stuff as Ross Byrne, or, base it around their needs as opposed to what I think they need.
And I think like that's something that we could definitely learn from in golf, is that, and I look back at Tiger and I think that he probably did this really well, is where he only played maybe 15, 20 events a year, 15 to 18 events a year, but performed unbelievably well. And I'm guessing is what he did was he did so much work in his off weeks, he had to do very little on his on weeks. And I see a lot of our guys and other pros and stuff like that, I think they work too hard on site, and then they have, their performances are still really good, but they're definitely tailing towards the end of the tournament when really you want to be ramping it up.
Yeah, you just don't want to be knackered by the time you come to the actual, like you said, the Sunday. Like, you want to be buzzing. You nearly want to have a few, leave the practice field knowing that you had a couple more kicks in you, or you had a couple more tackles today, but you would have loved to hit 2 more bags or whatever that might be. So, yeah, I think that's a nice way to be able to, I don't know, as coaches, it's a real challenge to leave them with just enough, but feeling that they had another bit, and that bit is like saved energy, coil spring to the weekend. Yeah.
And then I suppose the last piece, what would you say to, just kind of come full circle back to the innovation piece, players, especially at a high level sometimes, and coaches as well, can be reluctant to adopt change for fear of a negative impact on performance. But like with most innovation, we're walking into the unknown a little bit.
Yeah.
How do you help the players and the coaching staff like take that step?
I think it's, again, what I've learned is not to take the step for everybody at the same time, to individualize when somebody's going to push into something new or try something new. If I've got coaches that say are very, very tech savvy, then I know, okay, well, maybe let's use this interactive whiteboard, or let's try and push this in terms of sending stuff clips and they can but there's other guys that you don't want to give them something that the coaching tool, like the video or that feedback tool becomes a source of stress. And I think in our environment, the international environment, massively remove as much stress as you can, because the stress is inherently in it. They're playing for Ireland against another country and they're going to be on TV. Every game matters. The stress is there. You don't have to go looking for it. So by us adding anything that adds to that, I think that's that's something that I'm really, really conscious of. So for coaches as well, that their jobs are on the line the whole time too. So not to drag in innovation in say the week leading up to a semi-final and start a quarter-final and bringing in something like that. If you're playing in a final, like, you've got to the final, so just trust what you've done to get there. At the same time, I'm always trying to look at, is there a better way, and is there a different way, and can we do things a little bit more? Can we challenge? I know Nigel Pearson in soccer, I think he was the first manager who went off the dugout and up into the stand, right? And I've spoken to loads of analysts about this in the Premier League guys, and they say that it's just culture. It's just they won't get up, they won't stand, they won't go in the stand because it looks like they're detached from the game. Yes. They know they have a better view. They know they have more information. They know that it's an easier way for them to coach, but just visually, outwardly looks wrong. So that's a very simple innovation, and nobody will take that step because of the perception.
And it's the same in golf. It's like, when it comes to preparing for professional events, is everybody's scared to step away from the range. Everybody's scared from hitting loads of shots around the greens in practice rounds, even though the chance of you getting that exact same shot again is minuscule.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably why I'm asking the question is like, and I suppose that's where the ability to play different games with different levels of consequence and trialing it out helps. And I think that goes back down to, like you said, a lot of innovation is down to timing, because it might be the right thing, but if it's the right thing at the wrong time, you've lost it.
Yeah, I agree with you. Massive. Yeah, massively. I think Andy's good, like at the moment with, sometimes in set plays, he might say, right, we've got one more play to go here, lads. We've a line out on the 22, playing in 6-man off the top, and we've got to score a try. And you go through those sessions as a kid playing or whatever, and the ball comes off the top, and I don't know, you go again and you start it again. But like I remember a couple of times this year, one shot, okay, no, missed it, right, everyone in, and that's the end of the session. And the more of those little kind of consequential moments that you build, although you're not putting smoke in the cockpit, you're trying to say that actually this is the end of the meeting, or this is the end of the game. This is the end of the session. There is a moment where we've teed it up and you failed, and like you said earlier, about being okay failing, like, because you're pushing, you're training on the edge. So yeah, the messiness and the awkwardness of that will kick players on, I think. Well, that's my belief, and someone could disagree with me, and they're entitled to. So I that's just my own thoughts on it.
Well, I can't. I don't disagree with it. I'm definitely coming more and more. It's the least comfortable opinion to have, but it's probably the closest one to what we face in the highest stake environments.
Yeah, and that's why I love golf too, because I love how they, that the last 3 or 4 holes in any round of golf that's coming tight, where there's 3 or 4 players, all of those guys can play the exact same shot in their back garden and put the ball to within 6 inches of the hole. It's just who can do it at that moment. And because I think well, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's definitely a ceiling of skill in golf. Like the top 20, 30 golfers, I reckon there's not much between them, is there?
Oh yeah, well, like golf is about a score, and they've all shot 61, 62, 63, 64 at different times in their career.
That's why I love watching it, because it's who can pull that out when it actually matters, and not when they're doing it in back nine in Carton House
and who's okay with like I've actually had players before. One player I can think of where we've had the conversation about. She was always really good, but never really put herself like in the position to win. It was almost as if like really consistent, no variance, but always in the middle, like top third. And one of the things that we spoke about, and that's kicked her on a wee bit since, was like, are you okay with the vulnerability of putting yourself out there, like to be knocked? And she kind of like admitted, I'm a bit of an introvert. I don't know if I've always embraced that situation. And since then, she's come around where she's like, but you know what? This is what I want to do, and I love it more than anything. And I have to be okay with the fact that if I do this, I'm going to put myself in the limelight a bit more. And she has done, and it's like, I think that's definitely part of it. Is like Andy does, is like, right, we've got this one kick, make it or break, we'll go in afterwards. That's the same thing as like, we've got this one hole, you're tied for the lead, or sorry, you're one shot ahead, par it and you win, bogey you don't. What are you going to do?
Yeah. And look, that's the challenge. I love it. I think that's the challenge, just like that constant being okay with being on the edge, being in the real messy place and actually embracing it. So
Vinny, thanks a million, and as always,
sorry,
with you and I, we could probably do this for at least another 3 to 5 hours. So
sorry, what are we on, an hour and a bit?
Yeah, but that was brilliant. Thanks a million, Dave.
No worries. Okay,
really
right,
appreciate
thanks,
it.
Donald.